Breaking tonight from southern China. A disaster is unfolding on a scale not seen in decades. 4 massive hydropower dams have unleashed torrents of floodwater across Guangdong province, turning entire cities into inland seas. Streets have vanished beneath raging currents. Underground garages packed with thousands of cars are now submerged. Graveyards of twisted metal and desperate families are climbing to rooftops in the dead of night, waving flashlights for rescuers who may never arrive in time. Power is out, communications are down, and millions are already stranded in the dark. But this nightmare is only the beginning. Just offshore, a monster is growing stronger by the hour. Super Typhoon Ragasa, now a Category 5 storm, with sustained winds topping 140 miles per hour, and gusts so violent they could overturn warships. Meteorologists call it the most powerful storm to threaten China in half a century, a climate monster fueled by record-warm waters in the South China Sea. And Ragasa isn't alone. Behind it, another super typhoon, ominously named Raccoon, is racing forward, creating the terrifying possibility of a twin strike that could overwhelm defenses and plunge the Pearl River Delta home to more than 60 million people into chaos. What we are witnessing tonight is not just a storm, but the makings of a historic catastrophe that may change the landscape of southern China forever. Southern China's Guangdong province, one of the most densely populated and economically vital regions in Asia, is drowning under catastrophic floods. Over the weekend, 4 massive hydropower dams opened their floodgates in quick succession, unleashing walls of water that surged into already rain-soaked cities. In Dongguan alone, neighborhoods that had stood dry just hours earlier were swallowed whole basements filled to the ceilings. Ground-floor shops vanished beneath churning brown currents, and once busy boulevards turned into raging rivers. The sudden releases hit with little warning. Families had minutes, sometimes only seconds, to scramble upstairs or flee into the night as the roar of water swallowed everything in its path. Underground parking garages filled with thousands of cars became waterlogged tombs of twisted steel and shattered glass. By the time rescuers arrived, entire rows of vehicles were floating like toy boats, their headlights glowing dimly under muddy water before fading into darkness. Across Guangdong, the story was the same: motorcycles carried away, like driftwood homes gutted by torrents, shopkeepers dragging soggy merchandise up stairwells, while power outages plunged entire districts into silence. Survivors describe a night of chaos filled with sirens, desperate shouts from rooftops, and the relentless roar of floodwater pouring through the Pearl River Delta. And just as the region struggled to grasp the scale of this man-made disaster, a far greater threat began to loom offshore: Super Typhoon Ragasa. Across Guangdong and neighboring provinces, the atmosphere has turned from anxiety to outright dread. Sirens wailed through city streets, and loudspeakers blasted urgent instructions: stock food, fill water containers, secure windows, and evacuate if ordered. Families rushed to tape large X marks across their glass windows to prevent shattering a desperate but familiar ritual whenever a super typhoon threatens. Parents bundled their children into shelters, clutching flashlights and small bags of essentials, while elderly residents were carried on makeshift stretchers toward evacuation centers. Community shelters, many set up inside schools, and government buildings were packed to capacity by nightfall. Families huddled on gymnasium floors with nothing more than blankets and bottled water, waiting for the storm's arrival. Outside grocery store shelves were stripped bare in hours, bottled water rice, and instant noodles all gone, as long lines stretched down sidewalks. Gas stations reported shortages as motorists scrambled to fuel up before Ragasa's winds made roads impassable. But what made this crisis especially terrifying was the timing. Many residents had only just begun pumping floodwater out of their basements when Ragasa loomed offshore. Their homes were still caked in mud, their vehicles ruined, and now they were being told to evacuate again. Exhaustion and fear mingled in every conversation. "We survived the flood, but can we survive Ragasa?" one resident asked local reporters. Authorities warned that power outages could last days, possibly weeks, if Ragasa delivered its full force. Hospitals stocked up on generators, while rescue teams staged boats, helicopters, and heavy equipment in strategic zones. Yet even with all preparations, the sense was clear: nothing could truly shield Guangdong from what was coming. By the early hours of September 22nd, the sky above Guangdong turned a menacing shade of gray. Clouds churned like boiling smoke, and the air grew heavy and electric. Then, with a roar like a freight train, Super Typhoon Ragasa slammed into the coast. Its winds topping 140 miles per hour near the eye wall ripped through coastal towns with merciless force. Seawater surged inland, swallowing boardwalks, highways, and entire fishing villages in minutes. Storm surges pushed waves as high as 25 feet, tearing apart seawalls that had stood for generations. Boats moored in harbors were hurled onto streets like toys, crashing into homes and shops. In Dongguan and surrounding cities, windows exploded under the pressure. Rooftops peeled away one after another, like pages ripped from a book. Concrete high-rises swayed unnervingly, their glass facades shattering and raining down shards onto deserted streets. The howl of the wind drowned out everything else, punctuated only by the sickening crunch of collapsing structures. At the storm's peak, torrential rain fell at nearly 3 inches per hour, overwhelming drainage systems and turning roads into rivers. Cars floated aimlessly down boulevards that only yesterday bustled with life. Entire neighborhoods went dark as power grids failed. Transformers sparked in the night before being swallowed by floodwater. The devastation was immediate and surreal. Families trapped in upper floors waved flashlights from shattered windows, praying rescuers could reach them. Helicopters hovered above, battling the winds to drop supplies, but many could not penetrate Ragasa's violent core. The storm showed no mercy. Everything in its path was shredded, drowned, or carried away. By dawn, Ragasa's massive eye loomed directly over Guangdong, bringing a brief, eerie calm. Residents peeked out at the wreckage in stunned silence, knowing that the second half of the storm, equally powerful, was still to come. When Ragasa's eye finally passed, it left behind a scene that looked more like a battlefield than a thriving province. Streets once lined with neon signs and crowded marketplaces were now drowned under brown, debris-filled water. Families waded chest-deep through flooded avenues, clutching children, pets, and whatever belongings they could carry in plastic bags. The roar of the storm was gone, replaced by the eerie sound of silence, broken only by the cries of the displaced and the thundering of collapsing structures weakened overnight. In Dongguan underground, parking garages became watery tombs, submerging thousands of cars beneath 10 feet of floodwater. In Foshan, shopkeepers returned to find their livelihoods destroyed, stores, gutted goods soaked, and walls coated in thick layers of mud. Once busy boulevards had become graveyards of overturned vehicles, tangled power lines, and shattered glass. Rescue teams worked tirelessly, navigating submerged neighborhoods in inflatable boats, pulling stranded residents from rooftops and windows. Emergency shelters filled within hours, with families huddled together under dim lights. Some barefoot, some still drenched, all united by the same haunted expression. Hospitals overflowed with the injured, while doctors worked with flashlights as backup generators struggled to stay alive. Power outages spread across vast swaths of Guangdong, plunging millions into darkness. Cell towers toppled, cutting off communication and leaving countless families unable to reach their loved ones. Food and drinking water became immediate concerns, with volunteers and aid groups scrambling to deliver supplies through waist-deep floodwater. For many, the storm wasn't just an interruption, it was an erasure. Entire villages were swallowed whole, leaving behind nothing but rooftops poking above muddy waves. Survivors described the horror in whispers, the sound of walls collapsing, the rush of water, tearing children from their parents' arms, the helplessness of watching everything they owned dissolve in front of their eyes. By nightfall, Guangdong stood as a province on its knees, its once vibrant cities reduced to silence and ruin. And yet, even as rescuers struggled to respond, meteorologists issued a chilling reminder: Ragasa was still moving inland, and the danger was far from over. While Guangdong bore the brunt of Ragasa's fury, the storm's vast circulation spread chaos far beyond provincial borders. In Hong Kong, just 60 miles south, towering waves pounded Victoria Harbor, sending seawater surging into subway stations and ground-level shops. The city's world-famous skyline disappeared behind a wall of driving rain, while scaffolding collapsed from high-rises, scattering bamboo poles and steel across deserted streets. With air traffic grounded, more than 400 flights were cancelled, leaving tens of thousands of travelers stranded in the terminals of Hong Kong International Airport. Further east, Taiwan's mountainous coastlines absorbed relentless downpours, triggering landslides that buried roads and isolated entire villages. Emergency sirens wailed through towns as families scrambled into designated shelters, bracing for the storm's outer bands. Farmers in Hualien and Taitung watched helplessly as fields transformed into lakes within hours, their crops swallowed just weeks before harvest. Along China's southern seaboard, from Fujian to Guangxi, officials issued simultaneous red alerts. Coastal fishing fleets were forced to anchor in harbors tied down by heavy chains as waves as tall as 3-story buildings slammed against seawalls. Shipping routes across the South China Sea froze in place, with cargo vessels rerouted or stranded offshore. Analysts warned that the financial cost of halted trade, canceled flights, and destroyed infrastructure could climb into the tens of billions of dollars. In rural communities, inland Ragasa's heavy rains cascaded into already swollen rivers, threatening to burst levees and overwhelm aging flood defenses. Villagers rushed to stack sandbags, their efforts dwarfed by the scale of the deluge. Emergency text alerts lit up phones across multiple provinces, urging residents to evacuate to higher ground before nightfall. For millions of people across southern China and beyond Ragasa, wasn't just a storm, it was a rolling catastrophe, expanding its footprint with every passing hour. What began as a wall of wind and water in Guangdong had quickly evolved into a regional crisis, stretching governments' rescue teams and ordinary families to their breaking point. Super Typhoon Ragasa has left Guangdong and southern China in chaos floods, swallowing entire neighborhoods, power grids collapsing, and millions facing an uncertain future. As recovery efforts continue, one truth remains clear: storms are getting stronger, faster, and far more devastating. For those who survived Ragasa, the nightmare is not over. It's only the beginning of rebuilding from the mud, the water, and the wreckage left behind. If you found this report important, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and help raise awareness about the increasing power of these monster storms. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our latest updates on natural disasters across the globe. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think disasters like Ragasa are becoming the new normal in our changing climate? Or are we still underestimating nature's true power? Share your thoughts in the comments below.